Hello, welcome to Rough Cut Film Review. This is the review of the 2013 version of The Evil Dead. So, The Evil Dead trilogy, they're old-fashioned, pretty cheap films that are absolute cult horror classics. The Evil Dead 1 was a straight-up nasty horror film that became a poster child for the video nasties 1980s in the UK, you know, when all those films got banned by Mary Whitehouse, you know, being upset. Evil Dead 2 ditched some of the really nasty stuff in favour of some slapstick humour, which worked actually really well, and it's always held up as the example where black slapstick humour actually works because it manages to be funny and scary, which is a very, very difficult balancing act. Evil Dead 3 then sort of jumped the shark, really, where our sort of reluctant anti-hero gets sucked through this wormholey thing back to, you know, medieval England, although it looks suspiciously like Southern California, and he has to fight the Deadites, which are the Evil Dead. It's a 15 rather than an 18, which is what the first two were in terms of its rating in the UK. So it is more of a sort of fantasy adventure with very strange things going on. I was about to try and explain some of the weird bits going on, but it really, if you take it out of context, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So this is the 2013 Evil Dead film, is a remake of the first one. So we don't have any of the slapstick comedic humour of the second one. Third one is well out the picture. You know, we can chuck that in the bin now, although for record I liked it. So we are at the nasty end of The Evil Dead, and that's exactly where I wanted to be. So the 2013 remake, it's produced by both Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi, so the star of the original trilogy and the bloke who made them. They're clearly very involved here. It's directed by, and let's have a bash at this, Fede Alvarez. He's a Uruguayan director. He's made a couple of Spanish language horror films, but a really interesting choice to direct this, and I think it's right and proper that a young director came in and directed this while Raimi and Campbell produced and sort of, you know, had input on it. In terms of winks to the original trilogy, there are some really nice touches. So there's Ash's car from the Evil Dead 2, which is a wreck by the cabin in the new one. There's the cabin itself is identical, and there's the deer heads, you know, mounted on the wall inside the cabin, which is a really nice little touch again. Oh, there's also a university sweater that gets worn that's from the original trilogy. So there's all this stuff here that's there if you want to look for it. If you've never seen an Evil Dead film, all that stuff you won't pick up on, but that's absolutely fine. So in terms of influences, obviously the Evil Dead trilogy was a big influence. Things like Hellraiser, you know, classic horror like that. This is a film that's been made by someone that not only understands the original trilogy, but understands all the horror films that have come since then and their influence. So it's made by people that are very passionate about horror, who are clever people that really know what they're doing. In the far background of influences, really, we've got the writings of a chap called H.P. Lovecraft, who actually originally created Necronomicon, which is, you know, the evil book of the dead. So in this, one of the students, you know, one of the kids reads from this book and unleashes the evil. All that stuff is very, very Lovecraftian. So all that stuff about evil ancient beings being brought into our dimension that we're not really capable of understanding or able to effectively fight. So as I've said, this is more Evil Dead 1 than it is 2, but it's taken a few of the really good elements from 2. So you'll notice some of the camera shots are directly and very lovingly lifted from 2, but it doesn't look stilted, it doesn't look awkward, it fits in really, really nicely. Interestingly, there was one scene in the original Evil Dead that I read that Raimi really regretted due to its sort of exploitative nature, and that's the notorious tree rape scene where a young lady takes an ill-advised wander into the woods and she is accosted and then basically raped by the trees. To my big surprise, this returned in the 2013 Evil Dead. And I thought, crikey, what are they going to do with this that justifies it? But I do trust Raimi. He's a very clever chap, and, you know, we don't talk about Spider-Man 3, and I was really, really impressed. So I really do wonder if feminist writers are going to pick up on this, but I really think that they should. So the original, the scene in question, was sort of a 1970s, 80s female exploitation, you know, scene. It was really quite nasty and pernicious. The lady in question arguably enjoys what sort of happens to her, and really it's a scene that leaves a pretty nasty taste in the mouth, in all honesty. However, in the 2013 film, the scene sort of happens, then we carry on, and then later, instead of being that exploitation, it's then flipped into basically a revenge flick, really. So the nature of the scene itself is changed completely, and I thought that was a really, really interesting way of completely changing the nature of that scene. And the whole film is really essentially about redemption and making good on old promises. The horror genre has been, if you'll excuse the pun, done to death. But this actually feels, despite being really well trodden, they're not reinventing the wheel here. This feels really, really fresh, and I absolutely applaud that. We don't have the sort of meta-analysis, clever stuff of The Cabin in the Woods, which I really, really liked. It's a nuts and bolts horror film. 5 kids go to the cabin in the woods, but it's just really, really well done. It's done really intelligently. It's not being ironic or anything like that. It's just a fantastic film. There are 2 elements I think are done better here than in Evil Dead 1 or Evil Dead 2. The first is the reason for the kids to go to the woods and then to stay in the woods. And the second one is, in terms of backstory, there's a lot more here. So there's secrets from the past, there's intrigue there, which just keeps it interesting. It's not the shocking secrets of something like The Descent, but it's enough here to keep things interesting and to add a little bit more depth to the characters and to the film. The girl who does end up getting mistreated by the trees is a character called Mia. She's, I believe it's heroin. You know, I'm not really au fait with my drugs, but I think she's a heroin addict who's gone to the old family cabin after the mum passed away to go cold turkey, essentially, to get off the junk, as the kids call it. So she's surrounded essentially by her friends and by her brother. But then they make a pact to say, well, look, you know, Mia's acting pretty crazy, but we've all done this before and we think she'll die if she has another overdose, so we're going to have tough love. So there are several ways I can judge this film, really. So does it actually serve any purpose existing? Does it add anything to the original trilogy? I think yes, absolutely it does. Is it respectful of the original films without really being a slave to them? I think absolutely it does. It's a really good, scary, nasty horror film. It's bloody, it's gory when it needs to be. I mean, I'm a really old hand at horror. I love my horror films. They're probably the genre I love the most. And, you know, as a kid, this really was my bread and butter stuff. I don't scare easily, but I got some jumps here. I felt the tension, and the tension really doesn't let up. I mean, my only real criticism of the film is the pacing is at times a little uneven, but it's pretty relentless horror and pretty relentless terror, and it's really, really good, and I'm tremendously impressed and I'm tremendously relieved. So this is a very, very big recommendation from Rough Cut Film Review. Kind regards, Christopher Thomas.